Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the first sit-down video I'm filming in my dorm room, so we'll see how this goes. I might change up the setup depending on lighting, but hopefully this video is decent with lighting, and who knows about what loud noises are going on in the hallways or outside, but we'll cross our fingers. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena. I make college and book related content, and today I am bringing you my August wrap-up. So just to put this into some context, I started the summer about 8 books behind schedule on my reading goal on Goodreads, which if you don't follow me on Goodreads, you should. I'll have my account linked down below. And I actually finished the month of August 2 books ahead of schedule. So I definitely read a lot this summer. I read the most books I read out of any month in the month of August, and I'm excited to share them all with you. The first book I read in the month of August was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and I gave that book 4 out of 5 stars. This book follows the story of Zélie as she tries to understand her own magic and herself and tries to save the kingdom of Orisha from a tyranny. Much of this book is based on West African mythology as well as allegory of the Black experience in the United States. As I said, this is the second time I've read this book, and I found it much more powerful the second time I read it. The deeper meaning in this novel was just much more evident to me. I've done a lot of self-education this summer and reading a lot more books, and I was much more aware, partly because it was the second time I was reading it, but also of all the other books I have read and research I have done about specific topics: racism, colorism, police brutality. There was so much to unpack within this book. I also really enjoyed a lot of the side characters, including Tazane, who is Zélie's brother, and Amari, who is a friend she picks up along the way. However, I will say that I did not like the relationships in this story. I found them unconvincing and really unrealistic. It was kind of worse than insta-love, in my opinion. So that's why I couldn't give it 5 out of 5 stars. Immediately after I finished that book, I moved on to Children of Virtue and Vengeance, which is the sequel to this novel. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. At the conclusion of the first book, there's a ginormous cliffhanger. We know that magic has come back to Orisha, but we don't know at what cost or what the next steps will be, and that's what this book explores. This book was a huge disappointment for me. I felt like it was a completely different book. I didn't recognize any of the characters. I was sad to see some of my favorite characters become these foreign people that I did not recognize, and I did not like the direction they had taken. I also continued to dislike the romance because it continued to be unrealistic, and I just didn't appreciate that. Overall, I'm just really disappointed. I don't know if I'll continue the series, but I will say I really like the whole world building and the mythology and the magic, the blood magic. Like, I found that all very fascinating, but the characters really let me down in this book. The third book I read in the month of August was Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. This book follows the story of one family through multiple generations. It opens with Melody, who is wearing her coming of age dress. That was actually her mother's dress, but her mother never got to wear it. And so we learn a lot about the family dynamics and relationships and conflicts and struggles and triumphs that the family has met. I really, really liked this book. It's a short novel, but it packs so much into it, so many important topics and discussions, and I loved how it wove through different perspectives effortlessly. Jacqueline Woodson is an amazing author. I really do need to read more books by her because everything that I have read by her, I've absolutely loved. I think this book was just so family and character oriented. That is why I loved it so much, and I highly recommend this book. It's a quick read, but you will get so much out of it. The next book I read in the month of August was Digg by A.S. King. I actually chose this book because it is the Prince Award winner for 2020, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It features 5 characters: the shoveler, the freak, Can I Help You, Loretta the Flea Circus Ringmaster, and First Class Malcolm. It is a magical realism book, and it follows the story of this one family that has splintered into many different pieces, and the deep roots of white supremacy. I really, really liked the magical realism aspect of this book. I thought it was incredibly well done. The writing was so strong. I felt like I was in this odd haze of not quite knowing what was going on, which was definitely the author's intention. I really enjoyed a lot of the characters, and it was fascinating to be reading from all these different perspectives and be trying to put the pieces together. This book claimed to feature discussions on white supremacy, and I found that this is exactly where the book lacked. Whenever there was a comment about white supremacy, it stuck out so badly, and it made it clunky and awkward, and I really did not like that. And this author claimed in the back of her book that she thinks that young teen readers are incredibly intelligent, should not be sheltered. They deal with this stuff every day and should be treated as intelligent individuals. But the way that the discussion of white supremacy was handled in this book did not make it seem that way, because it just seemed that the author was saying white supremacy, fill in the blank, is fill in the blank, and there was no real depth to it, which I think detracted from the book overall. The fifth book I read in the month of August was Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. This was a book that I marked as want to read at the beginning of the summer when I heard it was coming out, and I was glad I could get my hands on it. This book follows a story of Echo Brown, which is the same name as the author, so it's largely based on her own life, but she is a wizard who lives in the East Side in Chicago, and it follows her coming of age story. She is able to get into a really great school on the West Side, and as she travels between the East Side and the West Side through these portals in different worlds, she really has to grapple with these two different parts of her. I did not like the magical realism, as I said in this book. The wizard aspect didn't really make that much sense to me, and I don't know that it actually strengthened the novel. I will say, though, I really enjoyed some of the commentary that was in this book. I especially was interested by the discussion of being a black man in America versus a black woman, because those are two very different experiences. But something I found when I started my summer research is there's a lot of resources about being a black man, and I read a lot about the black male experience in America, but not so much the black female experience, and so I was glad this book touched on that. The sixth book I read in the month of August was Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. This book was actually recommended to me by one of my English professors last semester, and I picked it up this summer. It follows the story of Reverend John Amos as he writes a letter to his young son. He is dying and he wants to pass on some wisdom to his son, but throughout the letter he discovers things about himself, shares his past and current events that he is struggling with. I found this book incredibly comforting. There were extremely poignant remarks about religion and life and just overall the beauty in life. I thought that was an incredibly powerful aspect of this book. This book didn't contain anything like too flashy or crazy. It was very simplistic, but that is why I think I enjoyed it so much, because it was very down to earth, and I enjoyed Reverend John Amos's perspective. The seventh book I read in the month of August was The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. This book basically is written under the concept that every city has a soul, and every major city in the world has to be officially born, and for it to be born there is an actual human being that represents the city. But this book follows the birth of New York City, which is a little bit different because of the 5 different boroughs. So there is an individual that represents each one of the boroughs. Immediately there is this evil dark force that is threatening the birth of the city from the very beginning, and the boroughs have to find a way to come together to make sure the birth of the city is successful. I loved this concept. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I was pulled right in from the beginning of the book. This is my first N.K. Jemisin. I know that's so bad for someone who's a big fan of fantasy, but I really love this book. I need to read more books by her. I obviously want to read the rest of this series, but I'm gonna have to wait for the rest of the books to come out. The representation within this novel was stellar. For me, I'm not someone who knows a lot about New York City, but I feel like a lot of the representation I saw growing up in movies and in books was incredibly whitewashed, and that was not this book at all. This book has been described as a love letter to New York City, and it's definitely that. I also think it was incredibly timely with the discussions that are going on, because it covered a lot of issues that are within New York City and obviously our country and the world. It was really interesting for someone who doesn't know much about the city to read about each of the boroughs and kind of learn about the boroughs through these people that personified them. And I thought that was very fascinating, and it made me do some more research about the different boroughs. As far as favorite boroughs go based on characters, I would say Bronca, or the Bronx, was my favorite character. I didn't like Manny. I got really weird vibes from him. I'm not sure if that was just me or if it was intentional, but I did not really like him. The next book I read in the month of August was Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The book follows the story of Okonkwo, who is an Igbo warrior living in a small village in Nigeria. He is dealing with a lot of issues of his own personal view of himself. It also covers the topic of colonialism, and that is exactly what the strength of this book is. It provides an excellent exploration of colonialism. This is obviously something very prevalent on the African continent during this time. The power in this novel is the ending. The last few pages really pulled the book together for me and made me have to stop and really think about it because it was incredibly powerful and moving. But I also really enjoyed the cultural aspects of this book. I learned so much about the Igbo people and cultures and traditions. I learned so much. There were so many little sayings that I thought were absolutely fascinating, like when the author was describing how closely packed the people were together, you could throw up a handful of sand and none of the grains would fall back to the earth. I just loved that so much. I love brilliant writing. The 9th book I read in the month of August was The Death of Viv by Akwakwe Emezi. If you watched my last video, you saw that I was reading this book. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars because, oh my gosh, I thought this book would make me cry. I was wrong. It absolutely destroyed me. This book starts with the actual death of Vivek OG. Vivek's body is found on the steps of her parents' house, and we basically are trying to find out how and why Vivek died. And it follows the relationship that Vivek has with their cousin. It is an absolutely beautiful book. The writing, the prose is so beautiful and lyrical. The foreshadowing was incredibly strong within this novel. I really appreciated that. I'm sorry for the music. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's fine. I also thought the message in this book was incredibly powerful. I finished this book and I was like, more people need to read this right now. I mean, it's gotten such high reviews, and this author, all of their books are stellar, so I need to pick up more of their books immediately. I highly recommend this book for anyone who loves beautiful writing, but for anyone who maybe wants to learn more about LGBTQIA issues. I also thought it was really interesting because while I was reading it, I was starting to think that it reminded me a lot of 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And then in the back of the book, in the acknowledgements, Akwakwe Emezi acknowledged that Gabriel Garcia was one of their inspirations, and I thought it was so interesting that I was able to pick up on that connection while I was reading the book. And the last book I read in the month of August, or the 10th book I read in the month of August, was Thick and Other Essays by Tressie McMillan Cottom. This is actually a collection of essays, as I said. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Obviously, it was incredibly educational. I learned so much, but I also just really enjoyed the author's tone within the essays and the persona that was on the page. There issues that were addressed in this book range from capitalism to racism to sexism and everything in between, because as I said when I was talking about this book earlier, that it explores a lot of intersectional issues. I loved the author's approach to all the different topics, and I thought the essays were obviously very well written. I'm not convinced if I'm a person who will love to read essay collections, because I'm currently reading another one for one of my classes and I'm not enjoying it, but I really enjoyed this one. This also addressed what it means to be a Black woman in America, which is something that I was talking about I really enjoyed in Black Girl Unlimited, so this further explored it. In the back of the book there are so many notes and resources for me to do further research on, which I'm really excited about. And yeah, so those are all the books I read in the month of August. I don't know how many books I'm going to read in the month of September, but hopefully I'll get some done that are outside of my school assignments. And if you have any book recommendations or video recommendations, please leave them down in the comments below. I would love to have some. And if you haven't already, please give this video a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in my next video.